Thank you for those beautiful words. I heard a little story about a man on a mission. I heard a little story about a boy who just keeps wishing. I heard a little story about a lady with a baby in a manger. I'll tell you right now something, I heard many things stranger. I'm looking all around, seeing what we've been through. Heaven's on the ground. Would you say you're here too? Would you say you're here too? Ooh. I heard a little story about a lead dog sniffing out trails and never getting caught. I heard a little story about a people in a foreign land, and every time I hear it, I know a little bit more about just who I am. I'm listening for sound, knowing that it's foolproof. Music's all around. Would you say you're here too? Would you say you're here too? Everything's profound when you hold it near you. Love is all around. Would you say you're here too? Would you say you're here too? I heard a little story about a man on a mission. I heard a little story about a boy who just keeps wishing.
Thank you, TJ. That was really wonderful, and I am just going to take a sec to make sure I'm sufficiently adjusted that you can hear me. So can you hear me? Sort of? Yes? Kind of? You can hear me. Okay, good. All right. So, once again, my name is Natasha Ekholm, the ministerial intern here at Center for Spiritual Living. And welcome to this beautiful Sunday morning, July 17th, 2022. It's a beautiful morning, isn't it? Yeah, it is. TJ's wonderful song really encapsulates what we're going to talk about today. What are you here to do? Okay. So, as you all know, or maybe some of you know, at CSL, we kind of do this thing where we all talk about some of the same themes every Sunday together. So we know that that is part of how we engage in community wherever our centers are. So today's, let's start back. This year's theme is Living in Everyday Wonder. This month's theme is thinking about that idea from the standpoint of relationships. And today's theme is thinking about that with respect to community or society. So the title that CSL came up with, You and Me Create Society, I really hate that way that sounds. But I love the idea of it. So I gave it a different name for myself. And what we're going to talk about really is building beloved community together. Because it really is all about what we do together. So the relationships that we have with people is what creates society and what continues to create society, right? We live in a world that is defined by the conscious agreements that we have with each other, but also a lot of unspoken and unconscious agreements that are often expressed in kind of the norms of our society and sometimes in the laws of our society, which we may or may not actually agree with, but we kind of go along with them because, well, it's the way things are, right? We're born, people tell us, well, this is the way it works, and so we kind of go along until and unless somebody stands up and says, wait, maybe this isn't the best way for us to live together. And when there's enough consensus, then maybe there's a change. So in Centers for Spiritual Living, in our teaching, the science of mind and spirit, religious science, we affirm a really foundational principle. There is only one God, and God is all there is. And God expresses itself continuously through all of its creation. That means through each and every single one of us. So if I am an expression of God, that also means that you are expressions of God. Wow. Does that mean that we have to like each other and everybody all the time? I sure hope not, because I don't. I admit it. I don't always, but I am called to remember that, and so we're going to talk a little bit about how that might work. So, yeah, we are called to remember that we are expressions of God, and that so is everybody else. And we cannot claim to love God if we are hating somebody else, can we? We cannot claim to love God if we are treating anybody unjustly, and that could be people, animals, the planet, right? And we cannot, and I really want to come back to this idea of we cannot love God if we don't know how to love ourselves, because that's part of where it starts, right? We encounter God in relationship, and that relationship, that very first fundamental relationship, is with ourselves. Does it always feel like we learned that at the beginning? I don't know about you, but I don't think I learned that at the beginning, right? That it was important to love myself before I could learn how to love anybody else, right? That first relationship. So this month and this week's theme is an invitation to really think, to really reflect about how we can spiritually engage in relationship, and how each relationship is ultimately how God knows itself. So how does that work? It's really easy to think about, I think sometimes, our teaching as a very personal kind of process and philosophy, right? We come to the center on Sunday, we hear a message, we learn some ideas, principles, tools to apply to our own personal individual journey. And that's awesome. but it's really just the beginning, because those same principles and tools are fundamental to how we relate with each other. We start from our very first moment on the planet in relationship, right? We are in relationship with our mother, with the rest of our family. We are in relationship with our extended families. I'm going to share some examples. So, relationship with family, here's mine, which has both biological and chosen elements to it. We are in relationship with our extended families. Here's mine too. In relationship with our chosen families. I think we all know this photo, and I'm happy to be in relationship with Boomer, for example. And for those of you who haven't met Boomer, he's a wonderful service dog who's taken a great snooze in the photo here. And hey, we're in relationship with our neighbors and everybody where we live. And when we think about relationships, there are so many permutations, aren't there? There's so many different kinds of intersections and issues and things that come up, and it can be kind of easy to be overwhelmed by all of that, right? How do we navigate all those things? Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So some years ago, Centers for Spiritual Living came up with a statement that expressed its view on the nature of relationships and the kind of world that we might live in, where those relationships would really be defined by the spiritual principles that we believe in. And one part of the statement was this: we see a world in which each and every person lives in alignment with his or her spiritual principle, emphasizing unity with God and connection with each other. A world in which individually and collectively we are called to a higher state of consciousness and action. So take that in for a moment, and I think it's really important to focus on the last piece of that, or two pieces of it. One is that we are called to live in alignment with principle. So we have to know what that is, right? What is the principle we're called to live in alignment with? And the second is that it involves two things, both consciousness and action. So it's easy to be contemplative. You know, we can kind of sit in our seat, we can kind of reflect and ruminate and meditate on things. Sometimes it's a little harder to take action and to know what that action might look like, right? How do we do that in congruence and alignment with principle? Another expression of this idea is the concept of beloved community. Are people familiar with this phrase, beloved community? Some people, yeah. So beloved community was a concept advanced by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It actually existed before he brought it forward, but he really raised that idea to kind of national and international prominence during the years of his work in the civil rights movement. And the idea of beloved community was not only about racial justice and racial reconciliation in our country, but it really went beyond that. It was a vision for fellowship, peace, and justice across the world, a global vision. Civil rights icon and Congressman John Lewis put it this way. He said, "A nation and world society at peace with itself." Just take that in for a minute. A nation and world society at peace with itself. What would it feel like to live in a world like that? Sometimes it seems like that's a pretty far away vision, doesn't it? If we think about what's going on in our country right now and in the world. But when we know ourselves as expressions of the divine spirit, which lives and moves and has its being as us, we are invited to embody love, not only as individuals, but collectively. So Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, said this: "Unity is the basis of all there is. There is but one God, but one mind, but one spirit, and but one power. When I embody myself solely in my thoughts, I am separating myself from that which I think would be my good. You may think this is a very subtle thing and could not be the reason for so much trouble. It is the foundation of most of our troubles, he says. I am unconsciously separating myself from my good. So let's unpack that for a sec. He's inviting us to remember that unity, that our connection with the divine is also our connection with everything else, with every other being on the planet, with everything that is alive. When we are in the consciousness of that oneness, of that unity, right, then we are connected to our good. And collectively, we are connected to our good. When we get stuck in our thoughts as individuals, we start to separate from that good, our own personal experience of good, but also from our collective experience of good. So what does that mean in a practical kind of way? So people make laws, right? And some of those laws are really helpful and protective. So we have laws to wear seatbelts, right? So thank you, Ralph Nader, so we don't fly out the window if we have an accident. We have laws to protect us from pollution, from bad drugs. We have laws to protect us from financial con men and swindlers. We have all kinds of laws meant to protect us. Yet we know that in our country and all around the world, many laws get enacted that are not intended to be helpful for everyone. They are intended to be harmful or to restrict the rights of particular groups of people. And we can think about examples in our own country, from slavery to segregation to today's kinds of policies and laws around incarceration. We can think of apartheid in South Africa. We can think of anti-Semitic laws that were in effect during World War II in Germany and elsewhere. And we recognize those as laws that were not good laws. Sometimes it seems as if those laws are really monolithic, doesn't it? As if it's so hard for an individual to do something about it. And yet history tells us over and over that when individuals join together, they can change things, can't they? And we've seen it here, and we continue to see it here. Right. So part of the invitation this morning is to reflect on what is yours to do. Is there something right now in this moment that is yours to do? I believe that as spiritually mature people of faith, that we are called to recognize and reflect on our own personal responsibility to live in congruence with our principles, to live in alignment with our principles. We are at choice, and that's what free will is really all about, isn't it? It's about choice. And what's really exciting is that we can exercise that choice at any time. It doesn't matter what we've done before. This is not about castigation. Oh gosh, you haven't done this or you haven't done that. It is about right now, this minute, what choice could you make to live in congruence? Ernest Holmes also said this. He said, you and I should form the habit of taking definite time each day to contemplate and affirm peace with justice. For there is no peace possible without justice, but faith without works is dead. We should not only pray, we should act, each contributing the best that they have for the common purpose, each willing to make any sacrifice necessary, for there can be no individual self-preservation without the preservation of all. So there's the choice, right? Faith without works is dead, right? What does it mean if there is not action that accompanies that faith? But it's up to each of us individually to decide what is appropriate, right? And everybody's choices are different. Everybody's situation is different. So only you can know what that is. So it is possible that since the very first time or the very first moments that people began to talk, which is presumably many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago, that's still an ongoing debate, right? How long have we been around here? That we have been complaining and commenting about what's wrong with the world. Whether it's something wrong with our spouses, our children, our partners, our communities, our governments, our choices, our weather, we complain. Do you complain? I admit it, I complain. Excuse me. We complain. And the energy of all those complaints, does it really make a difference? What do you think? Not really, right? Okay. The only thing that really makes a difference is when dedicated people begin to discuss and envision the world that they want to live with. And also, not only to take action, to actually become it, start to become it themselves. What does that mean? So we're invited to release our morbid obsessions about what's wrong with the world and start acting on them. And not to ignore them. You know, we don't want to do spiritual bypass. That's the phrase we use for when we're kind of ignoring something that's right in front of us that we should acknowledge. But it's kind of like what a doctor's doing in the emergency room. They have to see what's damaged, what's injured, what's going on with the person, but they're working towards their wholeness. And that is what we are called to do in a spiritual way. Living in society is to recognize the problem and to begin to work towards wholeness. So we know that our teaching, Science of Mind and Spirit, gives us tools to be able to begin to do that, to see a condition and begin to transform it. One of our tools, of course, is treatment, but we are also affirming today that another tool is action. So what kind of action are we talking about? Well, I'm sure everybody can think of a lot of examples of socially affirming action. We can think of Reverend Jerry here in our community, who works with Urban Street Angels, which is dedicated to supporting the needs of homeless teens, right? That is action. Another group that is taking action that our community has supported is California Labradors, Retrievers, and More, right? Which is a dog rescue organization which has rescued over 12,000 dogs here in San Diego and Southern California. They take action to address something that is not in congruence with principle. I think another really important way to do this is to listen to each other's stories, to recognize what is happening in our community, to bear witness to the experiences that people have. It may seem paradoxical sometimes to look at difference, to see community, but in a sense, when we see difference, we are acknowledging the full humanity of people. And the fact that their humanity may embody and express things which are not the way that we see ourselves or the way that they live, but are part of this wonderful diversity of how God chooses to express itself through us, right? Some people want to say things like, well, I don't see color when they're talking about, let's say, differences in racial differences, we might call them, right? Because they want to emphasize commonality. But a lot of current thinkers really say it's kind of the opposite. It's when we recognize the real dimensions of your experience, whether it's an experience that's affected by race, by ability, by gender, by any number of other dimensions of humanity, when we see and when we feel seen, then we begin to create trust. We begin to experience trust, right? And that creates a very different kind of energy in the world, I think. So how do we engage those stories? Well, you can do it in a formal way. You can go to a museum. Many of you know that one of my former lives as a museum curator. And a few years ago, I organized an exhibition called In Plain Sight, Mexicano Chicano Stories in San Diego. And the whole concept of the show, which was at the La Jolla Historical Society, was to focus on 5 stories of struggles and contributions by Mexicans and Mexican Americans here in San Diego. Stories that either had been known and forgotten or maybe never known at all. And it is surprising. I've lived here for 30 years. I had not heard some of these stories, and I had heard some but didn't really know the details. And why is that important? because when we know those experiences and we know those stories, we can be part of the communities that choose to act, whether as people immediately involved or as allies, in making something better. So did you know, for example, that nearly 100 years ago, San Diego was the location of the very first school desegregation case? That was in Lemon Grove. In 1930, the school board in Lemon Grove decided to segregate its schools. It only had one school. So they decided to make all the Mexican kids go to school in a barn. And the parents and the community said, well, wait a minute. And they reached out to attorneys, and a case was mounted. This was called Roberto Alvarez versus the Board of Trustees of the Lemon Grove School District. And they were successful on a statewide level. This was the very first school desegregation litigation in the United States. More than nearly 25 years before Brown versus Board of Education. Why is it important to know that? Well, I would suggest that it's important to know that because the history of segregation and racism in San Diego is deep and long and continues to the present day. Now, this doesn't mean it hasn't gotten better. Many people have struggled hard and worked hard to do that. But it means that understanding people's experience means you have to understand where they started and the stories they carry themselves. Sometimes these are stories that involve whole communities, and sometimes knowing these stories is also recognizing the experiences of individual people, right? Because we recognize that relationship and society happen between 2 people, 10 people, 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people. So we can do formal things to know these stories, and we can also just talk to each other, right? To learn more about those stories. Oops, let's make sure I'm turning these pages in the right way. Just to follow for a second on that line, again, for things that we may not really realize, beyond this story that I just shared with you about Lemon Grove, one of our congregants shared with me not so long ago that when she first came to San Diego, she knew it in her community, in the African American community, is the Birmingham of the West. Now, that's not because there were signs on doors that said colored here, whites there, but just because everybody already knew where those signs were, even if you couldn't see them. Emma. Oh, you're giving me a sign. Thank you. See, this is the problem. When I do teach school, I'm ready to recognize a raised hand. She's just given me a cue. Anyway, so what I want to emphasize this morning is that this is not just a humanitarian or social justice issue. It's a spiritual one. Because our spiritual integrity is based on how our actions and choices align with our spiritual beliefs. And our spiritual teaching is very clear about the nature of the world. So if we're thinking about manifesting a world that works, that means that we have to start thinking about our relationships with each other and those that we meet and that we may never meet. So for example, in many places around the world, and sadly in our own country in some places, there are norms that continue to perpetuate violence and hatred against members of the LGBTQ community. This weekend in San Diego, we are recognizing in Pride, right, which is taking place right now, today, as well as all weekend, we are recognizing the struggles of people to affirm their wholeness and their full beings as members of that community. And we see that embodiment in these activities, and we at OHM as a congregation affirm that, right? And we recognize that commitment and struggle, and the fact that these are choices to engage in a transformational process, and that we can make that choice today. So Hermann Hesse, the German writer, says, "It is not our purpose to become each other. It is to recognize each other, to learn to see the other and honor them for who and what they are." So I want to take just a moment to acknowledge this truth, that divine spirit individualizes itself in me and as in you. And I want to ask everybody to stand up. And to acknowledge that presence of God within you and within everybody around you. All right, so you can just, however you'd like to, if you want to put your hands together and just bow. But that presence of God is in you and it is in them. And I invite you to acknowledge that. If you're at home, I invite you to do that with whomever you may be with. And if you're by yourself, do it in your mind's eye, with your family, with your friends, with your neighbors. Because this is where we start. We start in that moment of recognizing the God that is in us, that spirit, whatever language you want to use, and that God that is in everybody else. And that is how we begin to build our community, I believe. So another statement of principle, and you can sit down, thank you. Oops, all right. Is expressed in a statement that's called What We Believe at Centers for Spiritual Living. It says, "We believe the ultimate goal of life to be complete freedom from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all." Right? So the statement of what we believe has several elements, but this is one. We believe the ultimate goal of life to be the complete freedom from all discord of every nature. So this week, as you go about your life, I invite you to pause periodically as you're interacting with the world and look around at the societal norms that you have agreed to follow and that people around you are following through the lens of a world that works for all. And if you notice things in your surroundings and your interactions and your environment that are not lining up with that are not demonstrating this vision of a world that works for all, ask yourself, what can I do to be an ambassador of that world, of this society that works? And once you have an answer, do it. Whatever it might be. It might be volunteering at a school or helping a neighbor with their yard work, or speaking before and with people about transgender rights, or sending money to an organization that does work that does good in the community. There's any number of things, and only you can know what is yours to do. And of course, there's always the opportunity to treat and to pray. But this week, focus on the action. Focus on this idea of treat and move your feet. So Jody started us at, in our meditation with an affirmation I'd like you to join me in saying together. Let's see, can make this happen. Martin. Thank you. All right, so I'd like to invite everybody to stand up again. We're going to say it 3 times together. All right, we're going to say it quietly, then firmly, and then I'm going to shout it to the skies, okay? So, I am a powerful catalyst of love within society. I am a powerful catalyst of love within society. All right, let's rock it. I'm a powerful catalyst of love within society. Ooh. Last word. Amanda Gorman, our poet laureate, says this: "A new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, only if we're brave enough to see it, only if we're brave enough to be it." Thank you.
Thank you.
More.
Yeah. You're my watercolor painting, you're my ruby in the rough, you're the song that I'll be singing When my days are dark and tough, you're my open-ended story. The lighthouse on the shore, and I'm just a little crazy about the way you always leave me wanting more. We're going up, up, up through the ceiling. It's more than a feeling. You got me believing. You're my island on the ocean. When my ship is tossed and turned, your perpetual emotion makes the fire in me burn. You're the solitude I'm seeking. You're the company I'm keeping. And I'm just a little crazy about the way you never look without leaping. Woo! We're going up, up, up through the ceiling. It's more than a feeling. You got me believing. We're going up, up, up through the ceiling. It's more than a feeling. You got me believing. Some say nothing lasts forever. Some say life is one and done. I say here we are together, together, and it seems to me that we've just begun. You're my candle when the lights go. You're the screen inside my window. You let the breeze blow through. You're my compass in the desert that's always pointed westward home. Even on the nights I'm on my own, I'm never quite alone. We're going up, up, up through the ceiling. It's more than a feeling. You got me believing. Yeah, we're going up, up, up through the ceiling. It's more than a feeling. More than a feeling. More than a feeling. You got me believing. You got me believing. You got me believing.
All right. Thank you, TJ. Awesome. Okay. Well, we are catching up here. Thank you, TJ. So it is our time now, everybody, of giving and receiving. This is the time where we can express our abundance by sharing our gifts and tithes here with the center. It's also the time, if you look in front of you, there should be an envelope that has a card in it. If there's anything that you would like, except for the first row, thank you, Jody. If there is something that you would like prayer for, please write it on the card. During the week, our practitioners and ministers will be praying for those intentions and concerns. And I just want to, so I'm just going to say a brief prayer here, simply recognizing in this moment that presence of that one mind, of that one source, knowing that that one is all the good that there is, and that that good is continuously seeking its highest and greatest expression through each and every being, and that that good flows in as and through and returns to each one, pressed down and multiplied. So we give thanks for all that is shared today, for for all of the love, the thoughts, the feelings, and the gifts and tithes, knowing that as they circulate through our experience in our world, they flow out from us as ripples in a pond, doing good and greater good. For this we are so thankful, and we simply say, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God, and yes, and so it is. So come on down. So I want to invite us, we've been saying a lot of affirmations today. Let's keep on affirming. So here is our Om affirmation. Please join me in saying, I am an expression of God, born into the richness and abundance of the indwelling presence. Today I walk upon my world, consciously creating my oneness within and around me. And so it is. Okay. And now we're going to sing the peace song. So let's, oh, wait a minute. Sorry, I forgot. Important thing. Announcements. Let me make sure that I think there aren't too many announcements for today. I should mention, because I overlooked this earlier, but for anybody who's online who'd like to send in a contribution, you can do that through Venmo, through PayPal, and other means, and also mail it to us. So thank you for that. Class is still open for those who are interested. This is the ongoing summer class about abundance, which meets on Tuesday evenings from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And Tom says, oh no. Not this week, though. Okay, thank you for the update, because that wasn't on here. All right. And Jody, are there any updates about Course in Miracles?
Yeah, starting September 5th.
Oh, you need to come up to the mic because they can't hear you.
Starting September 5th, every Monday, 9 a.m. on Zoom. The link is the same as the previous class, Course of Love, Course in Miracles. It will go on for at least a year. And if you're interested, please contact me before the first time that you attend. You can attend any time or not attend, but the first time, please let me know.
Okay. All right, thank you, Jody. All right, are there any other Wisdom Council members who are present? Any other announcements that I'm not aware of or have overlooked? No? Good, okay. In that case, now we'll sing Let There Be Peace on Earth. So I invite everybody to stand and take a hand.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With God as our power, loved ones all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be my moment now. With every step I take, let this be my joyful vow. To take each moment and live each moment with peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Thank you all. Love it, love it.